Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale Dragon M4A3 Sherman tank. Since the last video, a lot of progress has been made to the model's lower hull. The lower hull has been painted, as well as having its sprockets, as well as its functional VVS suspension affixed to the vehicle. We'll be going over these additions in this. Because the client requested to have the stock rubber chevron tracks replaced with the ECA T66 all metal track links, the sprockets of the model needed to have been changed. Sprockets were designed before the Dragon kit was developed, and because of that was designed to utilize the Panzerwerk drive sprockets. The Panzerwerk drive sprockets are a very nice detail component. Each sprocket contains two pieces. You have the bottom base, and you also have the front sprocket plate. The pieces themselves are casted in this black resin that we see here. One thing I like about the sprockets is that they are a solid casting. This allows me to drill a hole in the center of them, which, by the way, on the kit or on the part when you get it, has a small little countersunk divot drilled in, which aids the drill bit in hollowing them out. The way I like to mount my sprockets is I drill a hole in the center, I insert a steel shaft and secure the shaft to the sprocket, and then the whole sprocket slides onto the final drive. Comparing the Panzerwerk sprocket to the kit supplied sprocket, the kit supplied sprockets are actually pretty good. The sprockets themselves are representing more of an earlier style pattern with that of an open spoke variety, as opposed to the solid faceplate variety, which is found on the later version. The sprockets themselves do have their bolt detail present, but on the back portion of the sprockets, as of note, they are a recessed casting. This is an easy fix to do if you just fill this area in with casting resin or even body filler. Once sanded flush, the piece will have a nice thicker look to it, and it'll better match the flushness of the exterior portion of the sprocket. The kit sprocket is missing the small little hole which is found on the center portion of the sprocket mounting hub, which is found on these Shermans. The hole is a simple addition to add, and if added, will help the look of the kit sprocket. Also, in addition to helping the look with adding the hole, the center fasteners here are the correct shape. However, the small little mounting fasteners around the rim are just molded plastic nubs. By simply replacing these with miniature hex bolts, that's another addition that could greatly help the accuracy of your build. The sprockets glue very easily. They have a small little notch in them which lines up the faceplate with the bottom base. Because of this notch, the timing on the sprockets is going to be guaranteed to be nice and true, which will help when putting the track on. Will keep it from being ajar. The sprockets, because of the way they're casted, do have a little flash on them. However, the flash is really easy to get rid of, and here's one procedure that I like to do it. To deburr or deflash the area around the sprocket teeth, what I like to do is I like to use a Dremel rotary drum like we see here. It's one of those razor type drums that are commonly found in home improvement stores, and I put it in my drill press. I set the drill press table up so that the teeth are at the center portion here of the drum itself. To deburr, I simply turn on the drill press. Once the drill press is on, I carefully hold the sprocket with both my hands and guide the drill bit along the outer perimeter of the sprocket teeth. By doing this, it will remove any flash and make the piece nice and true. I already did the same procedure here to the bottom portion of the teeth, as both the top and the bottom need to have this procedure done to them. As you can see, after the bit is done, you're left with a nice smooth surface. Before you can do it to the top portion, I recommend first gluing and assembling the sprocket as one solid unit, which will better aid in holding the component when doing this procedure. Because of the replacement of the kit sprockets with the Panzerwerk ones, I needed to modify the kit's final drive. The kit's final drive originally looked like this. You had a very long tube emerging from the front of the final drive in which the kit sprocket would mount onto. And on the back we have two mounting lugs. Now, the Panzerwerk unit being solid, the long tube emerging from the final drive could have been removed. Before removing it, I went ahead and filled it in with casting resin. This was done to both the front and back portion of the canisters that are found on the molded and final drive. Purposes of this is that because of the way I like to affix the sprocket to the tank with the long 1/4 inch long shaft, making the two sections solid really gives a lot of structure and support and cradles the shaft once supported, and will keep the unit nice and true and will prevent it from wobbling around. Another modification that I made to the kit final drive was the addition of the small little plastic cap here. On Sherman tanks, there's a small little bulge and blister on this little point here on the end of the final drive. The purpose of this blister is to give some more structural integrity to this area here, which on the inside is where the gear that would emerge from the transmission would enter. Once it would enter into this portion here, this small little gear would then turn the large main drive gear, which will propel the sprocket and thus the track. This little cap here was missing on the kit, and addition of this little plastic cap was a very simple addition that also greatly improves the accuracy of the build. All that needs to be done now to this component is to drill out the shaft location for the sprocket and to add the cast texture. Now, for the sprocket shaft, instead of putting it on a drill press and drilling it out, in which the hole might not be square or might not be in the center, because of the large cylinder in the back, this component here is very easily fitted to a lathe, in which drilling the hole will make it not only true but also dead center on the casting. And here's the final drive fitted to the lathe. As we can see, there is on my lathe here, there's enough clearance for the component to spin freely without making contact with anything. The cylinder is fixed to the head chuck and is gripped on nice and securely. Also, because of the piece being filled in with resin, it gives a lot more strength to the part, in which you could tighten the unit on a lot more firmly without worry of the piece cracking on you or caving in. To drill the piece out, I simply use my 1/4 inch drill bit, fix that to the tailstock, and will now just turn the handle to drill out the center portion. And now the piece has been drilled out. I take it out of the chuck. And there we have it. A nice, perfectly centered hole that's nice and perfectly true throughout the entire unit. This will make, once the sprocket is affixed to the piece, the sprocket will also be on nice and straight and will not have any wobbling or dithering when it's placed onto the vehicle. With the cast texture now added, the two units can now be affixed to the transmission cover. To affix them to the transmission cover, it's done as per the kit, and that's done via adhesives. And here goes the completed sprocket. As we can see, the 1/4 inch shaft has been installed into the sprocket. The shaft simply gets super glued into the resin. The bond itself is very permanent, and you'll not have to worry about the piece ever coming off. Now, when it comes time to install it to the final drive, as we notice, the final drive has been affixed to the hull. Like on all my vehicles, I always like to have a steel washer that adds a nice little spacer between the resin sprocket and the plastic final drive. To install, I simply just insert it onto the tank as such. As you can see, because of the washer, the sprocket spins nice and smoothly, which will help when it comes time to install the tank's track. Now, as for the sprocket retention itself, the sprocket just gets slid into its final place, and no locking mechanism is required. Once the track gets installed, it kind of holds everything in place. However, if anyone watching the video really wants to keep the sprocket nice and retained, because of the 1/4-inch long shaft, you can easily find in a hardware store a 1/4-inch collar in which you would then just slip it over the shaft and tighten the screw. That collar, along with maybe 1 or 2 washers, will keep the sprocket in its place permanently and will not have it fall out. Like what was mentioned in the models unboxing video, the client specified to have the kit static suspension replaced with that of a functional VVS suspension from EastCoastArmory.com. This suspension here is available on the EastCoastArmory.com website and is available in several different variations. The suspension itself is fully functional. It has spring return and articulates with that of the terrain. With this suspension, the model will be able to have a more realistic effect if placed on uneven terrain in an outdoor diorama setting. One quick tip I recommend on building any model tank is that on the suspension, you go ahead and thoroughly paint and prime the components before assembly. This is true specifically for Sherman tanks. The Sherman tank, because of its complicated bogey design, there are a lot of nooks and crannies that we can see here that once assembled, getting the paint to get to these locations will be very difficult, if not impossible. This is true for both the ECA suspension as well as the stock DML kit suspension. By thoroughly painting and priming all the pieces on the runner or before assembly, you will thoroughly get the piece coated in paint, which will really help with the look of the model. Painting the lower extremities of the vehicle before the suspension is installed is not also true with the suspension, but also with that of the lower hull. If we notice, prior to the installation of the suspension, the entire lower hull received its primer and its base coat. Now, like I mentioned before, all of the components have been primed prior to painting. A lot of people might wonder why, or is it necessary to prime the surfaces of the plastic before adding on the paint. Personally, on all of my models, I always give it a quick shot of primer prior to the addition of the base coat. One thing I notice on these Dragon kits is that if you're using paints that are made out of acrylic or latex, that paint might not bond very well with the plastic and it might have a beading effect. By adding on a coat of simple rattle can gray primer, that gives you a nice sterile surface which the paint will better stick to. And here goes the lower hull of the model with the suspension now fixed. Now, the suspension is mounted to the model with fasteners only, just like on the real vehicle. No adhesives were used for the installation of the suspension to the vehicle. As you can see, the model rolls very nicely with the new suspension, and also, since the suspension is fully functional, the suspension not only articulates with ground terrain, but also has some spring to it, just like the real vehicle. Also, another feature that the ECA suspension has is that the pieces on a lot of the components are reversible. Once they're reversible, there are different casting numbers on each part. Because of this, you can differentiate each boogie housing from the other one by simply rotating a few of the parts around. This greatly improves the look of the model and gives it a little bit extra detail edge. In addition of the switchable casting numbers on the parts, we also see that the wheels are not all the same. Some of the wheels are represented as the late spoke style, while other ones are the early plated over spokes. It is very common for Shermans in the field to switch wheels. Either one gets damaged or one got worn out and needs to be replaced. Because there are so many different wheel options available for the Sherman, it was not uncommon to see tanks with several different type of wheels fitted in the field. By switching out 1 or 2 of the wheels on each side, also gives the model a unique look. Since the last video update, progress has been made to the model's Little Joe auxiliary generator. The kit supplies you with the conduit for the auxiliary generator, which runs on the lower portion of the sponson. If we notice towards this portion here, where the idler mount is affixed, there is a small plate that is welded to the tank's hull. The purpose of this plate is to protect the auxiliary generator exhaust from the idler wheel, as well as all the other debris and other foreign material that may be kicked up by the idler and can cause damage to the exhaust. The addition of the exhaust pipe that we have here is a nice add-on from DML. Comes with the kit and is very easy to build out of the box. It's comprised of two pieces. You have the long strut and you have the small little tip on the end. The tip is hard to see in this shot, but it's in a 45-degree angle. That is as per the real vehicle, and on the DML kit, it's separately molded to the piece. Once you glue it on, you do need to do a little bit of body work to remove the seam where the two pieces conjoin. Once that's done, the piece is ready for installation. Now, this exhaust pipe that we have here that runs along the sponson is unique to the M4A3. All the other versions of the M4 Sherman had a different layout for the Little Joe exhaust generator. Some vehicles, like the M4A4, the exhaust generator pipe was actually patched into the main exhaust manifold, and the exhaust would simply emerge from the standard exhaust stack, which is found on the back of the tank. Early versions of the M4A3 with the early style hull had the exhaust pipe running on the inside of the engine compartment and would emerge on the lower portion here of the rear wall. However, on the M4A3, they decided to mount it then later on the external portion under the sponson. It kind of seems like a bad idea in the fact where it could possibly get damaged from all the dirt and debris that gets kicked up. However, apparently this design worked very well because it stuck with the M4A3 all the way to the end of the Sherman's service life. The addition of the guard plate is a very easy addition that can be made to the model, and once added, really helps the look of it as well as improves the model's accuracy. Also, if we notice, the exhaust pipe itself has a grayish tint to it, as well as the main exhaust stacks in the rear of the vehicle. This is because they are currently going through their weathering process, and once weathered, the color scheme on these components will change. More information on this is to follow in the next. Also, since the last video update, the model's tow hitch has been added. If we notice, the tow hitch is affixed with a tow hitch extender. Tow hitch itself and the extender are both from EastCoastArmory.com, and the tow hitch is fully functional. It can open up and lock in the open state, and then it locks in the closed state. As for the tow hitch mount, on these M4A3s, I noticed that the tow hitches on their mount have this small little bracket here welded to the right hand or to the left hand side of them. There's going to be a small little retaining chain that is on this portion here, as well as a small little retaining chain kept on the tow hitch itself. Chains will be added after the model is painted. As for the tow hitch mount, there's this small little hinged bracket. As for the purpose of this bracket, none of my research has been able to find out what this bracket is. If anyone watching this video knows what purpose this bracket is, please feel free to post that in the comment section listed below. With the suspension now added, I can now focus on finishing off the rear idler wheels, as well as start work on the tank's upper hull. More information on that is to come in the following video updates. And with that, that concludes this project update video for this 1/6 scale Dragon M4A3 Sherman tank. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook. And also, don't forget to check out EastCoastArmory.com for more 1/6 scale tank builds, as well as other 1/6 scale detail components. Thank you.